Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we will be looking at my 2018/2019 NBA season predictions. This will be a two-part series, with the first part being my regular season predictions and the second part being my playoff predictions. In this video, I will predict every single NBA team's record for this upcoming season. I did this using a website called playoffpredictor.com. This isn't a sponsored video, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to them because without them this video would be impossible. If you want to do your own NBA season prediction, their website will be in the description down below, and give it a look after this video. Again, huge shout out to them. Now let's get right into the video. The NBA season is very unpredictable, and it can be hard to accurately preview the season. In this video, I will do my best to predict every NBA team's win-loss record. So let's start off with my Eastern Conference predictions, and then we'll move to the West. At the number 1 seed in the East, we have the Boston Celtics. They went 59-23 in my simulation. Last year, the Celtics were flooded with injuries. If this team can stay healthy, they might have the most talented roster in the league. They have Kyrie Irving, who showed last year he can successfully lead this team. Last year, he averaged 24.4 points per game, 5.1 assists per game, and 3.8 rebounds per game in 58 games. They also have Jason Tatum, who turned out to be a steal at the number 3 spot for the Celtics. Al Horford has finally showed his value on this team, often guarding the opposing team's small forward. One of the best parts of this team is the depth they have. They have many specialists who all fit their role perfectly on this team. Marcus Smart, who is the team's best defender. Terry Rozier can provide a spark of scoring off the bench. He led the Celtics in their amazing playoff run last year. Robert Williams, who is the rookie out of Texas A&M, who is an elite rim protector and is great at catching alley-oops. He was a steal of the draft in my opinion. The only question mark of this team is the health of Gordon Hayward. If he comes back healthy, he is the best number 2 guy you could ever have. This Celtics team has everything a dynasty would ever want, and they are only getting better. At the 2nd seed in the East, we have the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors finished 53-29 in my simulations and were 6 games behind the Boston Celtics. This team is full of question marks. They were the number 1 seed in the East with DeMar DeRozan as their best player, but they traded him for a guy who only played 9 games last season. Kawhi Leonard was a consistent top 3 player in the league before last year, but he is a huge question mark considering his quad injury. Another question mark is how unhappy Kawhi is in Toronto. Kawhi wanted to go to the sunshiny hometown to play for the Lakers. The Spurs traded him to the complete opposite of that, cold, ugly Toronto. If Kawhi does anything similar to what he did last year, this team may not even make the playoffs. But they did keep most of their team intact. They still have Serge Ibaka, Kyle Lowry, and Jonas Valanciunas. But this team is nothing if Kawhi acts like a baby. At the 3rd seed in the East, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. The Sixers went 53-29 in my simulations and were 6 games behind the Celtics. This team lost key pieces in the offseason, such as Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova. These guys' value on that team is hard to explain. Marco was a nice shooter off the bench, and the defense could not play off of him or he would light them up. Ersan brought the big guy away from the paint. This was key for Ben Simmons, who needed to drive in order to score. But the Celtics knew about this and often played off these two, deciding it would be better to let Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova light them up instead of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. They doubled the pair and the Sixers couldn't do anything about it. The Sixers let them walk in free agency and didn't really add any other key pieces. They added Zaire Smith, who I really like and could replace Fultz if he doesn't pan out. Speaking of Fultz, if he looks anything like he did in college, this team could come out of the East. But Fultz seems like a project to me, and I don't think he will have a breakout season next year. 4th seed, we have the Indiana Pacers. They finished with a record of 52-30 and were 7 games behind the Celtics in my simulations. This is one of the biggest sleeper teams in the NBA right now, in my opinion. Victor Oladipo is their number 1 guy, and oh man, does he have one hell of a work ethic. He texted his trainer minutes after losing to the Cavs. Miles Turner also looks amazing in the clips we have seen of him this offseason. They also signed Tyreke Evans, who had one of the best seasons last year. Evans was the most valuable signing this entire offseason. The Pacers could easily slip into the 2nd seed. The number 5 seed in the East, we have the Washington Wizards. They went 46-36 and were 13 games behind the Celtics. The Wizards had a great offseason. They signed Austin Rivers, who is extremely talented but had many locker room problems in LA. They also did what John Wall needed his entire career, a pretty good center to pair him up with, Dwight Howard. I've been saying John Wall needs a good center to pair up with. Although Dwight Howard is kind of washed up, he is much better than Marcin Gortat. The main problem I see this team having is locker room issues. Dwight Howard and Austin Rivers were called out by their teammate multiple times, and the Wizards are known for not having the best locker room in the league. John Wall and Bradley Beal have publicly stated that they don't like one another, and I don't see this team being anything more than a 5 seed. The number 6 seed in the East, we have the Miami Heat. They went 42-40 and were 17 games behind the Celtics. The Heat did nothing this offseason. They went 44-38 last season, and I have them having a worse record because the competition will be much stiffer in the East because the East got more deep this offseason. Not really better due to LeBron leaving, but the East got a little bit deeper. This Heat team will finish with almost the same record unless there's a key injury or trade. At the 7th seed in the East, we have the Detroit Pistons. They went 41-41 and were 18 games behind the Celtics in my simulation. The Pistons are taking an approach the New Orleans Pelicans took a few years ago. They have an amazing front court with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. These two are definitely worse than DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis, but I think Reggie Jackson will surprise some people this year. He hasn't found his role since leaving the Thunder, but the Pistons are fighting for something this year. They have a legit shot at being a threat in this weak Eastern Conference. They added Glenn Robinson III and have legit defense coming from Stanley Johnson, Reggie Bullock, and Langston Galloway. Blake Griffin is also very injury prone, but when he is healthy, he is close to superstar status. This is the best supporting cast Andre Drummond has ever had in his career. I look forward to seeing if this team can pull it all together. At the 8th and final seed in the Eastern Conference, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. They went 40-42 in my simulations and were 19 games behind the Boston Celtics. This might be a surprise to most. The Bucks are insanely overrated in my opinion. The loss of Jabari Parker was huge for this team, both on and off the court. Brook Lopez is a nice piece they added, but he can't be the center of a contending team. Ersan Ilyasova is also getting very old in NBA standards, of course. But I think Giannis Antetokounmpo will have a bad season. We saw what the Celtics did to this Bucks team. They locked down Giannis first, and then worried about the other guys. The person that kept the Bucks in that series was Jabari Parker, of course with help from Chris Middleton. Without Jabari, that series probably only goes to 5. Jabari made the Celtics give Giannis less pressure, which helped him have his quality series. Ersan and Brook can't do what Jabari did, and I think although they are solid role players, they can't fill the hole Jabari Parker left. 9th seed in the East, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. They finished with a 36-46 record and were 23 games behind the Celtics. I am a Cavs fan. I know this is pretty high up, and I understand, but hear me out. The fact that LeBron led this last year's team to the finals is a top 5 accolade in his career, in my opinion. The team last year without LeBron is probably the last seed in the East, but they added so many key pieces, and we have seen a lot of promise from this team. We are a top 10 team in the NBA based on potential. We have nice young players who are great role players, such as Larry Nance Jr., Ante Zizic, and Rodney Hood. And I view Colin Sexton will have a Donovan Mitchell type year this season. He is great on defense and can score the ball at will. He is extremely fast, and I love this pick. We also have our fan favorite around Cleveland, Cedi Osman. He is a straight-up beast in the Turkish league he plays in, and I saw him carry some of that swagger into the summer league. But the X factor of this team is Jordan Clarkson. Clarkson is horrible on a good team. It showed in the playoffs. But as the top scoring option of the team, I think Clarkson can be deadly. He reminds me of a less efficient Kyrie Irving. I think he will have a breakout year this year as the prime scoring option off the bench. And I haven't mentioned our best player, Kevin Love. We saw what he did in Minnesota. Hopefully we'll see that in Cleveland this next year. The 10th seed in the East, we have the Chicago Bulls. They went 33-49 and finished 26 games behind the Celtics. Many people believe that the Bulls had an amazing offseason. Although they did get some solid players such as Jabari Parker and Wendell Carter Jr., they lost a pretty big part of their team, Jerry Grant. Grant was the backup point guard for the Bulls last season and had a really solid year, but Jabari Parker, who is amazing when healthy, and Wendell Carter, who showed what he can do in Summer League, are much more valuable than Jerry Grant. So I do believe the Bulls are improving this year. Last year they were 27-55. I don't have them improving as much as the rest of the NBA fans believe, though. At the 11th seed, we have the Brooklyn Nets. They finished with a record of 30-52 and were 29 games behind the Celtics. This Nets team is one of the most intriguing teams in the NBA entering this season. The Nets have their point guard of the future in D'Angelo Russell, who is only 22 years old. They also have a center who impressed people last year in Jarrett Allen. Allen averaged 8.2 points per game, 5.4 rebounds per game, and 1.2 blocks per game last year. Allen also had a very good Summer League performance this year, not to mention Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench. He's someone that I believe will be a special talent in a few years. This Nets team went out and got a few free agents such as Kenneth Faried and Shabazz Napier. Shabazz Napier had one of the best seasons of his career last year, and I believe that momentum from last year will carry over to this Nets team. The problem with this team is the amount of point guards they have. Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell, and Shabazz Napier are all point guards, and I can't see any of them moving to the shooting guard slot. The 12th seed in the East, we have the New York Knicks. They went 27-55 and were 29 games behind the Boston Celtics. The Knicks would most likely be a playoff team if Kristaps Porzingis wasn't hurt. The latest timetable has them returning in January. This team had a good offseason, mostly building in the draft. They got Kevin Knox and Mitchell Robinson in the draft. They both had amazing summer leagues as Knox put up 21.3 points per game, 6.5 rebounds per game, and 2.3 assists per game. Robinson put up 13 points per game, 10 rebounds per game, and 4 blocks per game. Robinson had the most blocks per game in this year's summer league. Although the sample size was pretty small, only 4 games, we saw these 2 draft picks have the potential to tear up the league next year. The Knicks also signed stretched wing Mario Hezonja, who I am a big fan of. The Knicks also got a new head coach, Dave Fizdale. It seems like the Knicks front office is making a bunch of good decisions lately, and when Kristaps come back, they can contend for a playoff spot. At the 13th seed in the East, we have Orlando Magic. They went 26-56 and were 33 games behind the Celtics. The Magic are another interesting team heading into the NBA season. The Magic did what they wanted to this offseason, which was basically re-sign Aaron Gordon. They also got Mo Bamba, who I think is better than DeAndre Ayton. He reminds me of Thon Maker with a work ethic. This is going to be Jonathan Isaac's second season. He was often hurt in his rookie season, which hurt his productivity. Jerry Grant also signed with the Magic. He had a solid year in Chicago last season. This team is still in need of a star. They have enough role players, but they need someone to step up who is a star. I look at Aaron Gordon to become a star this season, but maybe Mo Bamba or Jonathan Isaac will take the crown as the number 1 scoring option on this team. In conclusion, this team has no shot of making the playoffs. At the 14th seed in the Eastern Conference, we have the Charlotte Hornets. They finished with a record of 20-62 in my simulations. It was really sad that Kemba Walker is wasting his career in Charlotte. He is such a talented player and is being wasted by an incompetent front office who has no idea what they are doing. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist does not deserve $13 million a year. Nicholas Batum doesn't deserve $24 million a year, for God's sakes. Marvin Williams is currently their starting power forward. Not to mention that one of the Zeller brothers is starting at center. My only reason to watch Hornets game is to watch Tony Parker before his legs fall off. This team has no young potential besides Malik Monk, who had a god-awful rookie year. Good luck, Hornets fan, because when Kemba eventually leaves, you will only be winning like 10 games a season. At the 15th seed and the worst team in the East, it is the Atlanta Hawks. They finished with a record of 18-64 and finished 41 games behind the Celtics. This team isn't as bad as most people think, but it is bad. They're developing a nice young core in John Collins, Trae Young, and Taurean Prince. And I do like the addition of Vince Carter to act as a teacher of these players. But there's really nothing else you could say. They aren't a team that can win now because Trae Young and Prince are still in the project stage of their career. In a few years, I do see the Hawks making the playoffs, but certainly not in the next 3 seasons. So guys, here's a quick little recap of the Eastern Conference right here so you guys can read it on the screen. And I'll give it a few seconds to leave it up here, and let's move on to the Western Conference. At the first seed in the West, with the best record in the NBA, we have, of course, the Golden State Warriors. They finished with a record of 63-19. This is a better record than what they had last year, and you can make the point that they got worse. They lost Zaza and JaVale McGee, their 2 centers, and took a risk on a big man coming off an Achilles injury. Achilles injuries are known to end NBA careers. And DeMarcus Cousins, a big man coming off an injury, is even worse. But if you go back to last year in the regular season, you'll remember the Warriors had a lot of injury problems all year. Steph only played 51 games in the regular season. Durant only played 68. That definitely won't happen this year. It's almost impossible. And even if DeMarcus Cousins only comes back at 60%, DeMarcus Cousins at 60% is still better than JaVale McGee at 100%. Also, DeMarcus isn't supposed to come back until later in the season, most likely in the playoffs, so that hurts their record just a little bit. At the second seed in the West, we have the Houston Rockets. They finished with a record of 59-23 and were 4 games behind the Warriors in my simulations. The Rockets have been heavily doubted over the last 2 seasons. People questioned the addition of Chris Paul to their team and said there was no way Harden and Paul could work together. They also doubted James Harden. They said he needs to prove himself in the playoffs, and with exception to a few games, Harden performed pretty well in the playoffs. They also doubted D'Antoni and how much he cares about defense. Well, the Rockets were one of the best defensive teams last year and locked down Curry and KD until, of course, Chris Paul went down at the end of Game 5. And now people are doubting how Melo will work with this team. And in my opinion, this should be a legitimate concern. Melo proved last year that he's a shell of himself when he is not the prime scoring option. When CP3 came to Houston, he was already a known star. He had the talent, and the question was, does he fit into the system? Melo doesn't have close to the amount of talent CP3 had. If Melo comes off the bench, that's perfect for him. He can be the #1 guy off the bench. But the loss of Trevor Ariza and Luke Mbah a Moute is a huge loss. They were the top wing defenders on that team, and it is going to be hard to find the same success they had last year without those guys. But they did keep their core together, Capella, Harden, and CP3. And those 3 alone is still a scary good team. At the third seed in the West, we have the San Antonio Spurs. They finished with a record of 58-24 and were 5 games behind the Warriors. They are high up to the greatness of the Spurs organization. We all know about the trade that sent DeMar DeRozan to the Spurs and sent Kawhi to the Raptors. DeMar DeRozan is certainly not as good as Kawhi Leonard when he is healthy. But when I watch DeMar, it reminds me of Kawhi Leonard. Good on defense and can definitely score when he needs to. I think DeMar will thrive in the Spurs system, and Popovich will teach him how to be a superstar just like Kawhi. The defensive backcourt of DeJounte Murray and DeMar DeRozan might end up being the best defensive duo in the entire league. They also signed sharpshooting wing Marco Bellinelli, who was a huge part of the 76ers playoff run. This is a very complete team that could make it deep in the playoffs if they play their cards right. At the 4th seed in the West, we have the Utah Jazz. They finished with a record of 57-25 and were 6 games behind the Warriors. This team surprised a lot of people last year, and I will have a video on the way about how the Jazz did so good last season. The Jazz didn't change much this offseason. They of course kept their stars such as Gobert and Mitchell, but one of the more underrated aspects of this team is their role players. Guys like Joe Ingles, Jay Crowder, Dante Exum, and Derek Favors all played significant roles on this team. They kept the things that made them good, so I expect them to have another good year. At the 5th seed in the West, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder. They went 55-27 and were 8 games behind the Warriors. In my opinion, the Thunder got better this offseason. They got rid of Melo, which clearly wasn't working, and they added a solid point guard in Dennis Schroeder. Schroeder will most likely be Sixth Man of the Year this season. They got Nerlens Noel, who has always had potential but never quite panned out. But he won't be expected to be a star on the Thunder. The main huge problem with this team is the lack of shooting ability. There is no bona fide sharpshooter on this team, and if you look at every contending team, they all have a sharpshooter. This will definitely lose the Thunder some games, and I don't think they'll be able to contend for a championship unless they go out and get a sharpshooter. At the 6th seed in the West, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. They finished with a record of 54-28 and were 9 games behind the Warriors. The Lakers added so many pieces this offseason, the biggest being the best player in the NBA, of course, LeBron James. They also added nice role players such as Lance Stevenson, JaVale McGee, Rajon Rondo, and Michael Beasley. But they missed out on so many other star players. They couldn't get Paul George because they didn't want to trade for him and thought for sure he would leave the Thunder and join their team. But, of course, as we all know, he re-signed with the Thunder. They won't trade for Kawhi Leonard, and there's a chance he stays with the Raptors. The Lakers seem to be too scared to pull the trigger on anything and always go with the decision that has the least risk involved. This won't win you a championship. The Lakers need to put pieces around LeBron for them to have any success with LeBron on their team. At the 7th seed in the West, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. They went 46-36 and were 17 games behind the Warriors in my simulation. The Pelicans are going to be an interesting team this year because they lost so many good pieces such as Rajon Rondo and of course DeMarcus Cousins, but they also added so many other pieces such as Julius Randle and Elfrid Payton. This team still did well when DeMarcus went down, which gives this team hope. But if this team fails, they may have to trade Anthony Davis away for younger pieces. One team that AD could go to is the Boston Celtics. They have enough assets to trade for a star like AD, but I think this team will have a pretty good year. At the 8th seed in the West, we have the Denver Nuggets. They went 46-36 and were 17 games behind the Warriors. The Nuggets last season had a team that could compete. Then they lost Paul Millsap and were 1 game away from making the playoffs. But they took risks this offseason, and I think it will pay off for them. They signed Isaiah Thomas to only a 1-year deal, which was smart, because if he doesn't work out, they'll just let him walk at the end of the season. But I think he will work out because he will be coming off the bench and will be asked to do very little. But the biggest chance they took this offseason was going with Michael Porter Jr. in the draft. They could have gotten someone who would have helped them win now, but they decided to go with Michael Porter Jr. If he plays like he did in high school, they can have a dynasty in the not-so-distant future. As long as this team stays healthy, there's no doubt in my mind they will make the playoffs. At the 9th seed in the West, we have the Portland Trail Blazers. They went 44-38 and were 19 games behind the Warriors. I think the CJ and Dame era in Portland is coming to an end. Getting swept by the Pelicans just threw them off. Damian Lillard had one of the best seasons of his career last year, and they still got swept in the first round. The front office knows this team can't contend, and they're probably going to make moves to get rid of either CJ or Dame. Teams have gotten better this offseason while the Trailblazers have consistently done nothing to help CJ and Dame. I think having this lazy of a front office will finally catch up to them this season. At the 10th seed in the West, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves. They finished with a record of 43-39 and were 20 games behind the Warriors. This is looking like it will be an ugly year for the Timberwolves. Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins don't like each other. Karl Anthony Towns doesn't like the front office. Andrew Wiggins really hasn't improved since coming into the league, and the defense this team was supposed to have didn't work out at all. I see Jimmy Butler or Andrew Wiggins definitely being traded this season. Besides the big three, there is no one else on that team that is really good. Taj Gibson is their starting power forward. Derrick Rose might be their starting point guard, which really is not good. If the big three of this team didn't have problems with one another, they probably would make the playoffs, but they have no chemistry at all. At the 11th seed in the West, we have the Dallas Mavericks. They went 36-46 and were 27 games behind the Warriors in my simulations. This team is going to be a boom or bust team. Most of the questions revolving around this team is about Luka Doncic. Is he ready for the NBA? But the Mavericks have made a huge leap signing DeAndre Jordan, which was a very good move. DeAndre is one of the more valuable players in the NBA because he does everything good, well except shooting. Dennis Smith Jr. is also going to have a very good year. This team needs a little bit more depth, and give them a few years and they will be a really good team in the NBA. At the 12th seed in the West, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. They finished with a record of 24-58 and were 39 games behind the Warriors. Lob City is officially dead. This team is filled with all role players. Their best player on this team is most likely Lou Williams. I say most likely because I don't know how Shai Gilgeous will react to the NBA game. If this team got a legit star, such as Jimmy Butler, Kyrie Irving, or maybe even Kawhi Leonard, man, this team could be special. But the amount of good role players they have is insane. I'd give them a year, and if they don't get anyone in the offseason, I would blow this team up. At the 13th seed in the West, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. They went 24-58 and were 39 games behind the Warriors in my simulation. I'm not sure where this team really wants to go. They signed a few young players such as Kyle Anderson, which would show that they are heading towards a rebuild. But they haven't traded Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, or Chandler Parsons. Marc Gasol is 33 years old and is clearly regressing based on last year's performance. Mike Conley is 30 but couldn't really seem to stay healthy last year. Even if Marc Gasol and Mike Conley are healthy, I don't see them making the playoffs. It is about time to blow this team up and start a rebuild. At the 14th seed in the West, we have the Phoenix Suns. They went 23-59 and were 40 games behind the Warriors in my simulation. The Suns have a plethora of young players on their team. They are still rebuilding and aren't in a win-now stage. They have been rebuilding pretty successfully in the past couple years. They have made great picks in the draft, such as Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. There are still players that haven't quite reached their place they were expected to be at, mostly Dragon Bender, who can't really get in a groove in Phoenix. One of the more intriguing signings this offseason was Trevor Ariza. I'm not sure why they signed him because he isn't young for NBA standards, and the money they paid could have been used to sign Jabari Parker or re-sign Elfrid Payton. The Suns definitely have promise for the future, and I see them contending for a title in a few years. At the 15th seed in the West, we have the Sacramento Kings. They finished with a record of 22-60 and were 41 games behind the Warriors. I actually can see the Kings having a pretty good year, but that is definitely a stretch. You can tell just by who they signed that they are trying to win in a few years. The Kings, just like the Suns, have a plethora of young talent. For example, they just signed Yogi Ferrell, who was a nice scoring/playmaking guard on the Mavericks. He is only 25. They also have De'Aaron Fox, who is only 20 years old. He already has the hardest stuff to learn, defense and playmaking. Now all you have to do is learn how to shoot, and he has enough time and talent to do that. To list a few more of their young talent, they have Buddy Hield, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Harry Giles, Skal Labissiere, and Willie Cauley-Stein. But the one player that can make this team a legit contender this year is Marvin Bagley III. He's an all-around player that can do almost everything. That includes shooting. Bagley has the talent for a number 1 overall draft pick, but we need to see that talent translate into effective play from Bagley. If Bagley has a Donovan Mitchell type year, the Kings have a shot of sliding into the playoffs, but I really don't see Bagley doing that in his first year. Thank you guys for watching. This, of course, is a 2-part video, so part 2 will be on its way either tomorrow or in 2 days. I do start up school tomorrow, and I also hope to keep up the daily uploads, but if not, that's really the reason. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you agree or disagree, please leave it in the comments down below. Also, if you have any suggestions on how I can improve as a commentator, please leave it also in the comments down below. I want your feedback on how I can improve. And as always, if you enjoyed my content, please subscribe. Thank you guys for watching, and see you soon.